It's not live. There we go. Now we're live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to what, is normally the energy question, but this is our new weekly podcast with Larry Schweikart, America's history teacher and best-selling author of a series of books. Actually, we have a neat slide that Stu prepared showing some of those books. There we go. Larry, how you doing today?
I'm great. And by the way, anybody who wants the new 20th anniversary update of Patriots history, which goes from 2018 to 2023, it's a PDF. I'll send it to you free if you email me at larry@wildworldofhistory.com. That's larry@wildworldofhistory.com. Get you the years 2018 to 2023 and about 20 pages of inserts of new research that I've done since the last edition came out.
Nice.
Well, dang, you'll be getting my email as soon as we're done here. So we had an interesting weekend in the presidential race here. A lot is changing very quickly. I think the biggest issue that's hanging out there right now has to do with Tim Walz and his stolen valor problem. He, not to dishonor his 20 years of service in the military in any way. That's all completely honorable. Even if he was in a backup role, which he was, it's the lying about it, right, Larry, that I think really kind of matters. And as you point out, I think is reminiscence of John Kerry's Swiftboat problem in 2004.
Right. I mean, the whole Swiftboat thing really hurt Kerry because they had deliberately selected him, if you recall, because he was a military veteran. And that way it was thought George W. Bush wouldn't be able to attack his patriotism or his being a left-wing anti-war ideologue and so on.
Right.
And then by kind of embellishing his Swiftboat activities, that led to that very famous ad by the Swiftboat Veterans for Truth, who came out, and there were, half a dozen Medal of Honor awardees. I hate to say winners. You don't really win a medal,
right?
But awardees. Yes. And I think that seriously dinged his campaign. The thing with Walz was he already was a heavy-duty liberal, at least alongside Harris, possibly to the left of Harris.
Right.
And they were trying to hope he would bulk up their middle America presence and look more like Iowa and Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Now, that's not happening now. That's kind of taken a big hit. So we'll see where this goes. My court guru friend, Zen Master, sent me a very interesting note because all weekend over Twitter, the Trumpites were kind of going nuts over the fact that they didn't think he was doing enough, that he wasn't doing enough personal appearances, and that he was kind of down in Mar-a-Lago. What's he doing down there? Why isn't he out on the campaign trail getting shot at more? And
nothing he does can please everybody, right?
Zen Master wrote me a short note Friday night called 87 Days. And if you go back from Friday, 87 days backward from Friday was when Biden stupidly challenged Trump to that debate. Yeah. And within the next 87 days, Trump took the debate, demolished Biden. Biden had to resign. Harris was installed. Trump was shot. And the U.S. Supreme Court issued what was probably one of the most, in his view, important decisions in court history with this immunity ruling. That all happened within 87 days. Well, Friday was exactly 87 days from the election. So his point was, look at how much can occur in just 87 days. And you're getting worked up over about a week or so.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's not any reason to expect that to slow down. It's only going to accelerate from here. The pace of news in this country, really globally, has accelerated to the point where now it's really impossible for me to really keep up with everything I'm trying to keep up with anymore. We have 3 or 4 different news cycles on many days, just complete news cycles that, in the past would have gone on for 3 or 4 days. I mean, now they go on for 3 or 4 hours and you're on to the
Mhm.
next thing. It's really an amazing thing. And it is, I think it's leading to make it much more difficult for people to be able to make any kind of an informed voting decision because they're so overwhelmed with the amount of information they're receiving.
Well, that's certainly true. You can see that more or less the assassination is out of the news now.
Yeah.
It's out of the
Insane.
news cycle.
Yeah.
But what isn't out of the news cycle is Walz and his National Guard lies, which are still there after almost a week. And that suggests that perhaps they're not going away. Now, coming up, and I've told everybody this, that Trump is wise to just not do a whole lot right now because the whole news cycle is going to be dominated by these fake polls of Democrat plus 5, Democrat plus 6, whatnot. Right. And also the Democrat National Convention is coming up in my favorite city, Benghazi by the Lake, otherwise known as Chicago. And
that's a great name for it.
And
Larry, I've got a serious question for you on this coming up. That is Benghazi by the Lake. Oh,
I gotta remember. I'm gonna steal that one, Larry.
Philadelphia is Kinshasa on the Delaware. So, but
what's Baltimore? What's Baltimore before you go on?
I haven't gotten one for Baltimore.
Okay, we got to get one for Baltimore.
Larry, is Walz going to get pulled, and is Kamala going to get pulled at the Democratic convention? Because I got even money they're not going to be on the ticket.
I don't see how they can yank them. Again, we're getting back to the ticking clock of the ballot printing. North Carolina starts voting in 30 days. That means the ballots not only have to be out, but they have to be proofread and returned to the counties who do all the ballot printing. Wow. People think that ballots just kind of drop out of the sky, as sometimes they do on election night. But nevertheless, the counties must print these ballots. You've got hundreds of counties in some of these states. Arizona only has 18, but there's states that have hundreds of counties. I think you said Texas has 204.
254.
Right? 254. Okay.
Yeah.
So each one of those counties has to be printing up the ballots. They have to make sure that every single name on that ballot is spelled right and that the person is running for the correct office. And you can't do that a day before you ship them out. You've got to do that weeks before you ship them out. So I think they're out of time. I think they're stuck with these guys. And yeah, I mean, there's going to be still another 2 weeks of honeymoon. And I tell everybody, understand that as long as you have that convention, you're going to have to wait till the convention's over before things really change. And then you'll start to see a very sharp change. And Tony Fabrizio, who is Trump's pollster, said that the minute Kamala was installed. He said, we're going to go through several weeks of polling that's going to show her ahead. And then things are going to, kind of flow out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. You talked about fake polls that were, go ahead, Stu, roll that one.
No, so this is truly what you're talking about, Larry. A quick reshuffle for our podcast listeners in a clown car, and the show rolls on.
Right. It's just a different face on the same clownish administration. But the fake polls, we saw one from New York Times Siena yesterday in 3 states. It was, man, I'm going to forget the states. Arizona, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. And miraculously, the New York Times, by surveying just 600 people in each one of those states, came up with the exact same result for all 3 of those widely disparate states. And 50 for Kamala, 46 for Trump, completely in conflict with every other poll taken in those states. And I think that's pretty typical of the kind of polling we've seen over the past couple of weeks. I follow Rich Barris like you do, and he's he does a great job of explaining what's wrong with polls like that.
Well, Trafalgar came out today with a poll in which Trump is up 2 to 3 in all these states, but only up 1 in Arizona. I'm here to tell you the voter registrations in Arizona are off the hook. The GOP now is up 260,000 over the Democrats, and that's doubling of how much they were up in 2020 when they managed to steal the election by 10,000 votes. So we've had entire counties that were blue counties flip over to Republican. Pima County, which is the Democrat stronghold, has actually lost Democrat voters. So how the New York Times can get Harris up by anything in a state where the Republicans have 250,000 more voters, I want to know how they did that one.
Yeah. So anyway, the thing is, and I think your point's well taken. You have to wait until the convention's over, and then Trump is going to kick up his campaign. He's got a couple of hundred, actually $300 million in the bank, ready to spend on ads all over the place. He's going to focus on the swing states, where the election's going to be decided, and that's going to be the deal. He got criticized on Friday for holding a rally in Montana, which I thought was one of the dumbest criticisms ever, because Montana's not a swing state, but it's got probably the most important senatorial election in the country in this cycle, right?
Absolutely. And I want to support that young man. He's got his own business and he's running a fire fighting company, and we need him in the Senate.
Yeah, that is the race, because we will win West Virginia. No question there. That's it. That's one pickup. And that brings us, I think, to 50-50.
50-50, yeah.
And we need Sheehy in Montana. He's the best shot we have right now. Lake, I think, is down 3 or 4, and it's hard to tell with all the crazy polling. I think she's down 3 or 4, perfectly within the range of Trump pulling her over, and especially that voter registration edge.
Yeah.
I haven't seen a poll in ages on Ohio and Bernie Moreno, but it's very interesting that Sherrod Brown decided he's not going to go to the Democrat convention in Benghazi by the lake, probably because it's too dangerous. But, they had a nice, bucolic, peaceful weekend here where only 33 were shot, and there was only 1 fatality there. So it was a very quiet weekend in Benghazi by the lake. So Brown's not going. And who was the other senator that wasn't? There was another senator from a contested state that.
I read that same article. You're right.
Shapiro.
Yeah.
So again, this really sounds like guys who know they're going to steal the election, right? I mean, all of these things refute this whole notion they're going to steal the election. Is they're terrified, and my source for a lot of the voter numbers says that his sources are telling him that Shapiro isn't going to assist in the steal. That he has informed Harris that he's not going to go out of his way to help her in Pennsylvania. So we'll see.
Well, that would be an enormous thing if that ends up not happening, because Philadelphia, Atlanta, Milwaukee, those cities are the main source of voter fraud in those states. And if the governor's not going to support it, that, I think the other thing it probably shows is the success the Republican National Committee is having. They brought in this army of lawyers to monitor all this, and they're doing spade work well in advance of election day in those states. So I wonder if Shapiro has become kind of concerned that he don't want to be a target of any action from those lawyers.
Laura Trump has been fantastic.
Yeah,
can you imagine
Watley too? Yeah.
What would have happened if we'd had them in 2020 instead of McRombush, right? So it's a world of difference, but you not only see it in the lawsuits they are filing, such as this appeal for the Arizona suit to the U.S. Supreme Court, but you see it in the pressure that's been brought in Georgia, where they passed 2 separate voter integrity laws.
Yeah. In
Virginia, where Governor Youngkin has ordered 2 separate voter integrity measures. And even in some of these other places like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, there have been some minor voter integrity changes. Right. Plus, over the weekend, both Nevada and Ohio announced they purged about 70 to 90,000 voters each from their rolls. Well, that's huge. Those are 90,000 dead Democrats who don't get to vote.
Right. We have that issue in Texas too, of course. In deep South Texas, county clerks refusing to purge the election rolls in advance of an election. But the current governor here in Texas has also done a great job in cleaning a lot of that stuff up and getting rid of these drop boxes all over Houston that were a source of pretty significant fraud in 2020 and 2022. But what about Arizona? I know people are very concerned about Maricopa County in particular in terms of voter integrity. We've had in the last 2 cycles a lot of problems with voter machines, automated machines, mysteriously breaking down in the precincts that tend to be heavily Republican. Has there been any improvements in that sort of integrity measure in Arizona?
Well, Stephen Richter, the recorder, got booted out. That's one good thing.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's going to affect this election. I voted in one of those precincts where they had a problem with the machines. I showed up and they had a big sign, where our machines are doing X, Y, Z. But then they gave you very specific directions to the next 2 or 3 locations you could go to, and none of which are more than a mile or so away.
Yeah.
So I don't think that the machines had that big of an impact. What caused Kerry Lake to lose that race in 2020 wasn't theft or machines. It was the fact that we had 100,000 McCain supporters who voted for Kimberly Yee for treasurer, but did not vote for Kerry Lake. And she lost by, I think, 30,000. So once again, it's the McCain poison in Arizona that we've got to somehow flush out.
Boy, that's a big job, man. That guy.
That's a big toilet.
Yeah, we don't want to go down that road.
Well, but Maricopa County, is half of that 260,000 gain. And right now, Maricopa County, according to my friend Seth Keschel, who does this kind of voter registration on an almost hourly basis, is about R+2 or R+3. Arizona's R+6 will likely be R+7 on election day. So, it's getting too big to rig.
What do you think about the Jewish vote? I mean, we saw a poll last week. I don't remember if it was Marist or it was one of the major polling groups that seems to be fairly good in New York State, came out with a poll showing a 50-48 Trump edge in the Jewish vote in New York State. Couldn't that have a pretty big impact on several of those congressional races that are going to be so decisive in the House majority?
Yes, if it translates to Congress.
Right.
Remember, one of the things that we've seen this whole cycle is Trump's running anywhere from 4 to 5 points ahead of any other Republican. And that's because so far the Republicans, especially in Congress, have been idiots. They passed a number of bills that people do not support. They keep sending money to Ukraine. By the way, this latest Ukraine thing is very interesting. People are all excited. Oh, Ukraine pushed into Russia. Yeah, I seem to remember Hitler pushed into
how'd that work out for Hitler? Yeah,
that didn't work out so well.
No,
that's the.
I'm fairly
I don't
nervous
blame him,
about
but
this. Putin is speaking today to the world. He is irritated.
Yes,
and
they sabotaged the nuclear power plant, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely ridiculous where the world is, thanks to the Biden-Harris policy controlled by the deep state. Unbelievable mess we're in.
Yeah, and what's turning out, what history is going to record about all this, is that it was Vladimir Putin who was the adult in the room, who repeatedly refused to react when goaded, who repeatedly did not take the bait to attack NATO allies. And people are later, at some point, are going to look up and go, actually, Putin was the good guy here.
Well, he's certainly been the cooler head in the. When we talk about this power plant, the nuclear facility, the narrative that's being spun is that Putin sabotaged his own facility for PR purpose, just like when the United States clearly blew up the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines. Obviously, the Biden administration did that. NATO did that. And yet the narrative in the media, the Washington Post, New York Times, is that Putin blew up his own pipeline. And now he's supposedly sabotaged his own nuclear plant. And the sad thing is is such a big portion of the American population buys this stuff and accepts it as reality.
Well, Putin's an easy guy to dislike. He's been theory on this whole thing is if you ask why do liberals hate Putin so much, and the answer is and why they hate Russia so much. The answer is that Russia was the biggest nation in the world to reject communism. They kicked communism out, and the liberals will never forgive them for what they did to communism. And so we'll see if they can succeed in goading him into further actions here.
Yeah. I mean, the war has been good to Putin for the economy. Russia is now at, I believe, 5.4% GDP. They are, instead of the 2.4 US. India has imported more than 1,000% increase in Russian oil since he invaded in there. His economy is doing quite well. He's done more for churches than has done Biden. I mean, you got to.
Well, it's you read the headlines of some of these stories. There was one today I had that Russians are engaging in more travel and drinking more cognac in one last splurge, right before the economy collapses. It's always the last, and they've been having a last splurge now for 3 years, and the Russian economy is only doing well because of the military spending. Well, wait a minute. We had this thing called the Cold War, and Northrop and General Dynamics. And hey, I think we need to have these companies. I think they need to be strong. But let's not fool ourselves that during much of the Cold War, some of American prosperity was being fed by the U.S. government to the weapons manufacturers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, David and Larry, what about we're funding, because of the Biden-Harris administration policies on ignoring the sanctions on Iran, we've effectively funded Iran, and now we fund Israel. We're funding both sides of this stupid war that's potentially happening. Yeah. Did I get that wrong?
Well, did you ever watch the movie Trading Places? And there's that great scene, the great scene where the Duke brothers are trying to explain to Billy Ray Valentine how they work. And they say, you see, Mr. Valentine, we make money whether our clients make money or lose money.
Right. Yeah.
For $1. $1 bet.
Yeah. And this isn't the first time the United States has been funding both sides of a war.
Iran, Iraq.
Right. Exactly. It's gone on forever, since World War II anyway. Really even before then, but that's
by the way, speaking of that Garden State, Iraq, I see that yesterday their legislature pushed through a bill to allow marriage to 9-year-olds.
Holy smokes. Wow.
These are the guys that we supported with our blood and our treasure for a decade.
Yeah, remember when Dick Cheney thought we were going to turn the whole Middle East into a subsidiary of the United States? All these democratic countries would just welcome us with open arms and completely change their cultures. And look where we are. I mean,
yeah, the purple fingers, right before they go.
Oh, yeah.
Well, do you see Kamala coming up, Larry, with her own ideas instead of stealing ideas from tax on tips?
No, this woman is extremely intellectually challenged, and that's why she doesn't even have a policy section on her website yet, even though her policies, they just cut and paste the Biden policies. She has no different policies from Biden that she can claim, because as soon as she claims a different one, people will go, well, why didn't you change it while you were in office?
Well, that's exactly it. Yeah. I mean, she's been there 3.5 years.
I know that you think Hannity is a mental midget, but do you want to show this one thing?
Captain TikTok? Yeah, sure. Play Sean. Okay. Well, you got to start it at the beginning. Hospitality workers.
Tips for service and hospitality workers. A few moments later.
Biden seems intent on taking your earnings hostage. Now, the IRS, they just announced this week that they want to start tracking all of the tips that workers earn so that they can be taxed for it. So much for Biden's sacred promise not to raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000 a year. Remember, this is all.
So she's at the thing and she says, you know, and Trump's been talking about this for months, Larry. I mean, how long has he been out there doing the and I love the fact that Joe Biden go out there and he was the one that sponsored taxing Social Security. So now
he wrote the bill. Yeah,
he wrote the bill. So
the
now you have Trump out there saying no tax for Social Security, and they're accusing him of robbing Social Security when it was Nancy Pelosi that stole from Social Security allegedly to pay for Trump's impeachment. You can't buy this kind of entertainment.
No. And you can't ask any normal person to explain these liars. You just assume they're lying when they open their mouths.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that'll backfire on her? Even with the media in her pocket, that's a pretty brazen move, isn't it?
Well, the media by its nature can't stay with one thing too long because they begin to lose viewers and audience. Yeah. And at some point, they've got to do some pivot and begin to show some sort of criticism so they can say, see, we were fair. We Dana Bash can say, we had on Harris and for 2 minutes. And after I made a comment for 1 minute and 57 seconds, she said, yes. And that was the end of the interview.
Well, so, you brought it up, Larry. So I'm going to ask if we take a look at this.
Yeah, this is a good time to play
this. This is a clip from CNN. And Bash is sitting there talking with him. So let's play this clip because I like the way that this was done. Let me rewind it to the beginning here. And I got to hand it to JD on this one.
He had a good morning yesterday.
He was out running around.
Literally a novel virus.
But Danny, you asked me about okay. You've now asked me 3 questions about comments that I made 3 years ago. I wonder what Kamala Harris thinks about the fact that she supported policies that opened the American southern border. I wonder what Kamala Harris thinks about the fact that she lied to the American people about Joe Biden's middle facility for the office. You are interviewing me, Dana, because I respect the American people enough to sit down for an interview.
I appreciate that.
Kamala Harris has been the nominee for 3 weeks. She hasn't sat down for a real interview.
Believe me, we are asking. You're not going to get a disagreement there.
But the point is, Dana, you've got me for 15 minutes or however long you have me. We should be talking about public policies that matter. How are we going to lower inflation? How are we going to reduce the cost of food and housing? How are we going to close down that southern border? We've talked so little about that. We've talked a lot more about a sarcastic remark I made 3 years ago. I think we should talk about the issues that most Americans care about.
I only asked you one question about that. I asked you about policies, and I was asking about much because it was.
I think he did a great job.
Yeah.
She had the deer in the headlights look there.
Yeah. And he did that on 3 different shows. I mean, he had 3 different hostile interviews with left-wing Democrat reporters who pretend to be journalists, and did very well with all of them. I don't think Kamala Harris could do that in the face of hostile questioning like he was getting.
Well, this goes to show, again, that Trump was 100% correct in selecting Vance as his VP nominee when you had all these other people out there. Oh, he needs to take somebody like Nikki Haley, or as I affectionately nickname her, Knick Knack Paddywhack, give a youth a bomb. Or Marco Rubio. The only retweet I ever got from President Trump was when he called him sweaty little man. I said, you should give him give the sweaty little man a bottle of water.
Yeah, and of course they desperately wanted Haley to be on that ticket. The establishment did. And that's the reason why the media has gone after Vance like they have, because he's not
deep state.
What's her name? Anyway, yeah.
He's a Trump mini-me with a beard.
Yeah.
Trump mini-me. All right.
He is that, and that's why he was the right selection.
And what's your point?
I did a book event Thursday night, and the guy next to me had those caps and some other ones in red.
Yeah,
and I said, would you like a copy of Patriots History? I said, it's $25. I'll trade you a Patriots History for 2 of those caps. And so he says, this is it. This is barter. This is the way to do it, man.
I'm in.
Yeah, that's a
I
good
think
looking
it's
cap. I like
fantastic.
that a lot better than the red ones.
Do what now?
I like that black cap much better than the red ones. I think.
Oh,
it's a
it's
better
just
look.
because it's on me.
Guys,
well,
how are
that's
we
what
going to
it is.
spend this time and not discuss the most important question of the day, which is Jerry Jones going to pay Dak Prescott and CD Lamb?
No, he's not. He's not going to pay Dak. He might pay CD Lamb, but he's not going to play Dak. Not going to pay Dak. Dak is already vastly overpaid. What is he making? $44 million now.
Yeah.
I think who was the quarterback that just signed for $53 million a year and is now, But when Dak signed that contract 3 years ago, he was the highest paid quarterback in the league, and now he's like 9th. And so he's mad, and he's going to go on to some other team, and the Cowboys will, at that point, blow up this annual failure of a football team and start all over again.
I've been watching on Apple. I just finished Dynasty, this series about the New England Patriots, and I recommend it strongly to everybody. Yeah. It's an amazing look at what it took to keep that team together. And you had 3 very strong personalities in Kraft and Belichick and Brady. And unlike Jerry, Kraft found a way to make it work for 6 Super Bowls.
Yeah, Jerry, the irony of Jerry Jones, and I guess we can just go down this road. He had built the best football team in the NFL history as of 1994, but he spearheaded the effort to implement this salary cap system. And the irony is he didn't have the slightest clue how to manage that salary cap for 15 years and tried to do it himself, couldn't do it, and destroyed his franchise because of the salary cap that he was instrumental in implementing. Had it not been for the salary cap system, the Cowboys might have won 5 Super Bowls with that core
team. You had Alvin Harper, who could only play for the Cowboys, and he was a star in the biggest games. He vanished every other game, but when you had a playoff game, Alvin Harper was there for a touchdown or 2, right?
Yeah.
And you had all these linemen who just were superb with the Cowboys. That line, I watched just for the heck of it last night, the Super Bowl with the Bills, the second one. And they literally ran the same play almost 7 times in a row and just blew out the Bills. And Emmitt Smith would just walk into the end zone almost untouched sometimes.
Yeah, the offensive line, of course, is the key of the whole game of football, and that's just my philosophy, but I think it's most coaches' philosophy. And the Cowboys after that, after 96, that all broke up. That line started to retire and break up. And they didn't field a decent offensive line for 15 seasons after that. And now the line's back to be pretty good, but
if we had Travis Frederick back, man, what a horrible loss for the best center in football. If he was on that team, that line would you wouldn't need a defense. Just keep that offense out all day.
What are the Cardinals going to do this year? Speaking of disappointing franchises.
I've never bought into the Cardinals because they're just like such a foreign team to me. I did used to follow Arizona State. I actually met Frank Kush in an airport one time.
Yeah, he was a great coach.
I taught at Eloy Public Schools, which is about 70 miles south of where I live. And Eloy is a tiny migrant farm worker town, and yet it produced 4 NFL Pro Bowl players, 2 sets of brothers, Art and Benny Malone and Mike and Mossy Cade. I mean, how wild is that?
Oh, Mossy Cade, Texas Longhorn. Yes, sir. I remember Mossy from his playing days. He was just terrific, absolutely terrific. So what's God, man, we're all over the place. One point I wanted to go back and make that I think is such an interesting aspect of history. We talked about John Kerry getting Swiftboated in 2004 and how it killed his campaign. the whole motivation for picking Kerry, or what wasn't the whole motivation, but one of the reasons Kerry ended up winning that nomination was Dan Rather's invention of fake news around George W. Bush's National Guard service and the use of false documents on the CBS evening newscast that were proven to be false, and Rather coming back on a week later and saying, well, the documents were fake but accurate.
Yeah.
And that was literally the invention of fake news in the American
And
media.
what was so astounding about that, because I was an active member of the website freerepublic.com, and it was Freepers who immediately within an hour figured out that the typewriter that produced that could not have been around because it wasn't invented yet. And they put that out within 1 hour. And what made that whole episode so historically important was that fake news was outed within an hour of being put out. And that showed a shift in the news from the big three and their power and influence to the new internet-based, web-based news system that we have now.
And it's amazing how it's grown, right? I mean, I really do believe it's the future of American media. I'm so happy to be on Substack myself, and you're there and Stu's there. And it's like people have this hunger for real news, real truthful stuff in the media, and are just leaving behind the legacy media in droves. And it's really led to pretty much a bankrupt situation for many of these major media outlets. I mean, we've had some of them just completely disappear over the past few years. Huffington Post and some
they
others.
Would all disappear if not for their corporate owners,
right.
The bigger companies, GE or whoever it is that owns them, they would all be gone because none of them can sustain themselves on their viewership or their subscriptions, and people just don't want them.
Yeah, CNN and the Washington Post could not exist if they had to make a profit, right? I mean, they literally couldn't exist. I think MSNBC is a loss leader at NBC as well, and is it Universal that owns them? AT&T owns CNN. I mean, it's like they have these media operations, I guess, to use as propaganda outlets. It's hard for me to understand why these giant corporations continue to prop up these media operations other than sources of free advertising. Well,
I think there's a lot of social wokeism involved, and that the CEOs of these companies want to believe that they're doing a socially good thing by propping up these outlets and whatever. They're not so concerned with the actual message they spew as it is that they're concerned that yes, we have the Washington Post, and democracy dies in darkness, which we foster a lot of that darkness, but it dies in darkness.
Yeah, God help us if the Washington Post is our last bulwark against losing democracy. It's dead already if that's the case.
I would have never guessed that being a game show host wannabe like me, I actually wanted to retire and be a college professor, but the colleges went so far left. I'm now a podcast host by choice. And I'm like, holy smokes, Batman, what a great time I'm having. And I'm surprised by the millions that are listening. It's just nuts.
But, and I always wanted to be a game show host, but I had great years at the University of Dayton, and my wife and I talked about this. I retired in 2016, and I said, I got 5 more years in me. I could easily do that 5 more years, but I see the smoke signals on the horizon, and it's not going to be pleasant here within 5 years. I didn't foresee he, she kind of pronoun comments, but I knew something bad was coming. And so I left. But up until that time, I have to say the University of Dayton been very, very good to me. They were really wonderful. And I think I mentioned to you guys, I had the choice, not quite the choice of going to A&M or Dayton, and that the freeze on the hiring occurred literally while I was at A&M interviewing. And I ended up at Dayton, and they were wonderful to me. So I've got nothing but good things to say about the University of Dayton.
Which A&M? Texas?
Yes.
Texas A&M. Okay.
Yes.
I'll be darned.
They were going to offer me a associate professor job and 1 year to tenure. And it was just an awesome, they liked me that much. And then while I'm sitting there with the dean, he gets a call from the president who says the oil revenues have frozen. We've frozen all hiring as of right now. So,
yeah. So this was in the 80s, right?
This would have been in 85.
Yeah. Oh my God. The worst year of my life. Yeah. In terms of professional job, that was the only time I've ever been unemployed since I was 14 years old. I mean, it just, for 3 months,
I was a rock
I
musician,
didn't have a job.
so we were always unemployed.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. I had 2 brothers who were doing that too. Yeah. They were constantly unemployed. I'm sorry.
But this is now a weekly series, if I understand you guys right.
Well, it is. And yes, absolutely. And we're going to keep doing this at least through the election, and then we'll reassess from there and maybe keep it going. This is a lot of fun. I appreciate you guys for being willing to do it. And Larry, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. You're such a wealth of knowledge. I won't say that about Stu, but you certainly are.
Well, I get a chance to speak with the Rush Limbaugh of energy once a week. So that's pretty cool.
See, that's what I wanted to be when I was growing up, was a radio talk show host, and it never happened for me. Anyway, I think we're going to wrap up here. It's almost 11 o'clock. And next time, folks, from here on out, we started this one 15 minutes late today, but from here on out, it's going to be at 10 a.m. Central Time, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, or Pacific Time, excuse me. Larry's in Arizona. And we hope you guys will join us, and please feel free to make comments and questions while we're doing this. We'll try to get to all of them while we're online. And with that, gentlemen,
we'll see you guys next
time
week.
To call it a day.
See you next week.
Y'all have a great week.
Stream is cutting out.